This is a detailed video about the rubber trim strips that you'll find on the Mercedes R107. We'll be showing you the cheapest place to get replacements and also the cheapest place to get some of the hardware that you'll need to fit these trim strips properly. We're actually going to be fitting these trim strips to our red 280 SL using the correct hardware and pointing out what happens to your car, or what will happen to your car if you don't use all the correct hardware and fittings to actually fit these trim strips. In the description below, we'll be leaving you all the part numbers to these specialist parts, and if you're interested in actually fixing one of these trim clips, we have done a very detailed video on that subject previously, and I'll leave a link in the description below where you can view that. If you're doing a full restoration and plan to replace all of your rubber and chrome trim strips, by far the cheapest place to get the rubber trim clips is Euro. If you're not a wholesaler, you can go along to Rock Auto and buy a set. You can also get sets from SLS in Germany and the SL shop in the UK. But as I say, most of those reproductions will come from this company here. And you're going to pay anywhere between £300 and £500 for a set of just the rubber trims. That does not include any of the hardware, and it does not include the chrome sill trim strips or the gaskets. A complete fitting kit for these rubber trim strips will cost you around £70 to £100 depending on where you buy it. The lower chrome trim strips, once again, you can buy the whole kit. That'll cost you £300 to £500 depending on whether you get a reproduction or a genuine part. As I mentioned, I'll be leaving all the part numbers in the description below, but if you are just missing individual grommets and pieces, my advice is always to give Mercedes a ring first, because often you will find that Mercedes have exactly the same parts for cheaper than anyone else. Just before I go ahead and show you how to fit these trims with the correct hardware, I'm just going to take a quick look at what goes wrong with these trims over a period of time. What happens if you don't address that, or you choose to do a bodge repair? At the end of each of these rubber trim clips should be a fitting in here, which looks like this here. It should be a screw fitting, and that slides in the aluminium moulding, and 9 times out of 10 what you'll find is that that is either missing altogether, or it's so badly rusted and corroded that there's only a small section left. Now, you can buy these parts individually and just replace that if that's all you need to do. When you buy these trims new from somewhere like Euro, you'll find that they come with these nice screws already built in. These rubber trims on the other end of the screw should have a little hook fitting like this, and what happens over a period of time is that hook fitting gets rusty and eventually will break like that, and this will either become loose and people will start to use silicone or some other bodge to attach it to the car. But just have a look at this short clip here of a beautiful 1989 SL which had a bodge repair. Just have a look at what happens. Once again, these little hooks fittings here are still available, and if yours are missing or corroded, you should replace them. If the paintwork on your car is in pristine condition and you go along and fit one of these without the correct hardware, what you'll end up doing is scratching the paint both here and probably here as well. Before you start slotting that into the gap, what you should do is cover it with a piece of special rubber tubing to protect the paintwork, and indeed on this one here you can see that that still has that tubing intact. The slots into which these metal hooks slot on the car should be protected by little plastic grommets. Like, again, if you have a look at the clip of the 1989 car that we looked at, which was in pristine condition, you can see the remnants of this clip still attached to that. On the longer mouldings, this is from the front fender or front wing, they have additional fittings here, and these fittings over a period of time wear out, become worn out and loose, and you may find that this no longer sits flush with the door or the wing, and then what happens is you start to get moisture inside here and all of this starts corroding. Once again, you can buy these plastic fittings here individually. Obviously, if you go out and buy a new piece of trim. It'll come with all of that, but you can actually buy these individually. What you may find when you look at your car is that you have some of these grommets here into which these fittings fit that are missing, and you can get these from Mercedes, which is probably the cheapest place to get them. But what often happens is people try and fill the holes in their car with silicone, and if your door or fenders have been painted, you'll find that if they've done the job properly, they've taken these grommets out and you'll have to replace them. There are different styles of grommet, both depending on your car and what it is you're trying to fit. Generally speaking, if your car's in good condition, you'll be using these red grommets here to fit the side trims. You can also use these white grommets here, which are ever so slightly different, and then to fit the chrome strips below these rubber trims, you're going to be using a slightly different grommet. This is designed here to click into something thicker than just the sheet metal of a door. And you'll find on the SLC, I think these grommets here are going to be blue, and they're slightly different dimensions. You can go along to a company like SLS in Germany, and they will produce, well, they produce specialist grommets. If none of the standard grommets fit because they're worn out, because your hole is too big, they sell other grommets that might fit into that hole and still be able to receive this fitting here. Once you've fitted this rubber trim to your car using the correct protection, both the plastic grommets and the tubing, and you've replaced these if need be, you need to think about how to actually attach this to the car. What many people do is just they bang on an M4 nut on there and think that's job done. In actual fact, all of the screw fittings that go through the bodywork of your car should be protected by these specialist plastic cup washers here. That'll stop this screw damaging the paint as it goes in. And instead of putting a metal steel nut on here, you need to use either a brass nut like this or a specialist plastic nut. You also need to use washers for each fitting. So for each screw fitting, you're going to have a plastic washer or cup washer, then a metal washer, and then either a brass nut like this or preferably a plastic nut. When it comes to fitting the chrome trim strips, you're going to need rubber gaskets to fit those on the sills, which you can get from the SL shop, and I believe you can also get them from Mercedes and places like SLS. But SLS have also developed a special nut to fit that chrome strip, because what you may find, especially if you've had any work done on your sills, is that the holes are no longer as small as they should be. And you can use one of these special nuts here, which they've manufactured. Now, these are super expensive. They're about €5 each, but luckily you only need 2 of them. The other side of the chrome strip is actually screwed to the car with a little self-tapping screw like this, and make sure that you use either a chrome or a stainless steel screw for that purpose, and not simply a steel screw, because that will rust almost immediately. We're going to have a go at fitting these trim strips, and if you're fitting a complete set of trim strips, you're going to want to start with the door first, because the door will give you the alignment for the front fender and wing, and there's slight movement up and down on these end bits, but there's no movement on the door. Now, before we can fit this door trim strip, we've got one grommet missing, which we've bought from Mercedes, which hopefully will fit in there. Sometimes these are super tight, and it's an idea just to put a touch of grease or silicone to help them slide in. They should go in with a snap. It's super difficult to get those grommets in, especially if your car's just been painted, but do persevere and avoid bashing with a rubber mallet or anything like that. Just squeeze in with your thumb. These trims with Euro come with handy double-sided tape here, so don't forget to take that off first. The last thing we've got to do is insert one of these plastic grommets. Make sure you get it the right way round. Now, what you may find is that this does not fit in here if your door or car has been painted, because these holes are slightly thicker. Once you've got that plastic grommet in, the next thing to do is just to cut a piece of rubber tubing, just protect that hook there. Once you've got that hook there in, which is easier said than done, you need to make sure that each of these grommets align up so that the end fitting actually fits in that hole. And what you may need to do is actually bend that hook back slightly to make the gap wider. If you're confident that everything is lined up, you should just be able to use the palm of your hand to clip those in. They do go in with a perceptible snap. if they're lined up. It almost feels wrong to be hitting the door this hard, but if you don't do it, you won't get these to snap in, especially if they're new. If these are snapped in, there will be no gap at all along here. It's important to make sure you remember to put that last plastic grommet in there before you click this in and before you put the nut on. You just need to pull this seal out here and put the fittings on the other end. You're going to need a M4 washer first, and then either a plastic nut or a brass or stainless steel nut. Buy the plastic nuts from Mercedes or the SL shop, etc. They're about €1 or €2 each. You can buy 100 of them from China for about the same price. It can be incredibly difficult to thread a washer onto that washer on just by sliding it down a drill bit. To get the nut on, I'm just going to use a spare bit of this tube and put it in there, start it off with this to get that nut on. Not so easy to film it with one hand. We just need to tighten that up with a socket. Another reason for using plastic nuts, especially on the fittings that are exterior, is that when you screw them on, if you screw a metal nut onto a coated or galvanized screw thread, you will take some of the protective coating off, whereas when you screw a plastic nut on, there's less chance of that and less chance of it rusting in the future. In the case where your rear quarters have been repaired, which is the situation with this car here, the chance of getting that plastic fitting in there is almost zero. And similarly here, you're going to need a very sharp drill bit and just to re-drill the holes. Let's try and get this front fender moulding on. Well, we've finally got those rubber trims fitted. It's not what I would describe as a perfect job, and nor is it a 5-minute job, especially when the car's been worked on and nothing is as it should be. And you can see there's just a slight misalignment here where that hole is not in the right place, but there's not much we can do about that. The next thing we need to do is fit the chrome trim strips, and once again we're going to have to drill some holes in here to accommodate these. This is a good example of the sort of bodges that people do. You can see that this has got the wrong fittings in here, and here at the end they've got a red grommet in there, whereas what you need is one of these flat grommets, otherwise you won't be able to get the washer and nut on the other side. Just a word of warning on these Euro trims, probably the same as all trims, but if you try bending that end hook up there to accommodate the grommet there, you'll end up snapping it off because they're very brittle. I've done that twice now. Luckily I have spare ones and these are pretty easy to disassemble, but if you don't have spare ones, my advice would be to forego using those grommets and don't try bending those clips up. Here I have a selection of the lower chrome trims which have come off various cars, and it's a good way to illustrate some of the mistakes and bodges that people do. First of all, these red grommets here are not the correct grommets for securing on the lower trims. You need to use these grey ones which have a wider gap here. You do not need glue to glue on those rubber gaskets. This should sit flush. If you're using new grommets and new clips, it'll sit flush without any glue or silicone. Secondly, you'll often find that these clips here get broken, and what you should do is replace them so that chrome trim fits flush on the car. Rubber gaskets are invariably knackered, like this one here, so what they should look like is this here, and the final chrome fitting passes through that, and on the other side here it should just be a hole that you make yourself. Once again, you can see that that's completely missing, so this is no longer going to be sitting flush, so these would have definitely needed to have been replaced. The worst bodge on two of these is that they've drilled holes straight through these chrome trim clips and screwed it to the car. Instead of using these fittings here, which about to get attacked by a bee, which slide down like so and actually go through a hole in the car. These are still available, and that is how the chrome trips should be held on at the end, not by drilling holes in them. You can still get these chrome trips, and in fact you can get the whole fitting kit including the gaskets, but it is between £300 and £500 depending where you get it, just for the lower chrome trim clips. This here is another example of a bodge. That is the wrong screw in there. It should be a small self-tapping chrome screw. First thing we've got to do with this car is fit the grey grommets in all of these holes, and then we're going to need to drill a hole back here to accommodate that last fitting, because once again these quarter panels have been repaired, and I think possibly these are new front wings. We're going to have to drill a hole here or at least these are new sills, just to accommodate the front of that chrome trip. The thing I've noticed about this car is that there's 14 holes along the bottom here and only 7 holes in this rubber gasket, which is a bit odd. It's not a 5-minute job getting this seal to sit flush on this chrome strip, not least because the seal has stretched slightly. So if you do buy these seals in advance, make sure you don't ever do what I did, was hang them up to keep them straight. They really need to be rolled up so that they don't inadvertently stretch. This side here, we're going to do something I hate doing, which is drill a hole into the metalwork of the car, but that is actually how it's held on. Well, we finally got that lower chrome strip on, but boy did that take some doing to line up all those holes in that seal. We've just got to trim the end of the seal here just to make it line up with that. I'm going to leave this video here. The SL looks a million times better with those trims on. There's still a few bits of adjustment to do, but this being England, it is now raining in August. In the next video, we're hopefully going to be finishing off the interior. I think I have found a man down in Kent who takes old vintage car stereos, Becker, Mexicos, etc., and makes them modern. So I'm hoping that we might get a stereo for this car and be able to finish off the interior and then move on to the subframe, etc., get rid of the parts car, put this up on the ramp and start powder coating all the subframe and redoing all the suspension mountings.